Hi, and welcome to this month's edition of Meet Geek. My name is Matt. Thanks for coming back and joining. If you were here for the first webcast, the first Meet and Geek, we met Robert from Actiphy. He is back as promised to show us around ActiveImage Protector. Today, he'll be covering the installation and scheduling a backup. How you doing today, Robert?
I'm doing great, Matt. How about you?
I'm doing well. So I downloaded my own desktop version of ActiveImage Protector. I got through the installation. It was pretty simple, but for those that are installing it today, maybe they have it sitting there and they haven't quite decided to activate it yet. Why don't you take us through those steps?
I'd be happy to. Let me open up a screen for presenting. And we're going to choose this one. And we are sharing now. All right, what I'm going to do is go ahead and just start this. This is the installation that I went ahead and recorded.
Okay.
And we're just going to go through that. Why is there shared by me? Okay, we're good to go. That should be.
Yeah, I can see it.
You see? Okay, it's starting up.
Yeah.
I was confused
Great.
because it's the same background. All right, I double clicked on setup, and of course, it's going to ask you if you want to allow this app because we're using Windows 10 Professional. And here we go, verifying the installer. This setup file is something you're going to end up downloading. All right, now we've arrived at the first splash screen. Welcome to the setup wizard. We're going to click next. We're entering the product key. Doesn't matter if you want to try to copy it off because it's only good for 15 days, period. All right. Now we are at the end user license agreement after clicking next, inputting the activation key or the product key. I'm going to scroll through this very quickly because I know how you love to read these.
I love to read those.
Are we going too slow for you?
No, you're not.
Not at all. Okay. We accept the terms of the license agreement and click next. Pretty straightforward installation. Two choices, a typical install. We'll click next. And this typical is more geared towards end users like you at home. We go back and we can click custom to see all the components that can be installed. And this is where you get your first set of options to make a decision. Now I can go ahead, we highlight each one, but there is a description at the bottom as you see me roll up and down all these components. You install the backup agent, mounting for viewing the backup image as another drive. All right, Windows PE boot environment, we'll touch on that when we get to the interface, the user interface, but installs the files needed to create what you might refer to as a tangible media in order to boot up and get into this backup program. Right. The console, definitely need that. The Image Explorer is our version of the Windows Explorer that allows you to look into the backup image, and the task tray makes it convenient to get to all the utilities without having to start up the program. You just reach down there by the clock in the lower right-hand corner. All right. I changed because I am running a boot drive that is non-disk. It's an M.2 drive, so it's faster. And I have a regular disk drive, 1 terabyte, as my D drive, and that's where we're going to install the program onto the D drive. And this is the installation splash screens. Just to kind of give you an idea of what components are in there. Sometimes they move too fast. Sometimes it gives you a chance to read some of this. Again, some of these components that were installed that I'm installing may not apply to you and your environment, but they would apply to another environment with more machines, servers, things like that.
I noticed on these graphics that the very first one that popped up was Bootcheck, and you covered that in the first webcast. You want to touch on that a little more?
Bootcheck is a feature you'd use if you are having if you're using virtualization in your environment. Because what Bootcheck does, we're going to stop presenting right now, and we'll get back to that. What Bootcheck does is using the virtual environment. It checks the bootability of your backup by booting your backup image file in a virtual environment on its own. And this is as simple as, let's boot it up. And if you're at the screen, then you get a message that says everything works. This image will boot up if you ever need to restore it.
Okay.
Or put it in that kind of environment, into a virtual environment to boot it up. So whether you're restoring to a machine or a virtual environment, it confirms that your backup is bootable.
So now that we've finished the installation, it is your recommendation, I'm assuming, to reboot your machine to make sure that everything installs properly, right?
Right.
And so once we click into ActiveImage Protector, we're going to see a dashboard, right?
Right. I'll bring that up on the screen now. We'll go back to presenting. And there we go. This is the dashboard. Once you've installed, this is the first thing you'll see. The first splash screen you will see when you start the program.
Okay. How do I know? How do the users know that they have the most up-to-date version of ActiveImage Protector?
Oh, you want to make sure that that's happening. Okay.
Yeah.
Pretty simple. We have a number of menu items across the top. Now, this has been developed so that if you're a button pusher for menus and you like that, then that's great. But if you're into using the column because it's a bigger font, I guess, I'm not sure, that's another way to get to anything you want to do rather than going through all the menu preferences. You click on Help at the top and click About. And what that tells you is what versions you're running. All right. If you want to check for an update, you can. It's going to connect to the server. We're talking across the internet. It's going to check for the server, and it tells you your system is updated, is up to date, version 5.1.11.6665.
Great.
Click OK. You've confirmed that you now have the latest and greatest, as we say in the industry, the latest and greatest version that you can possibly have. So if it was the case where we weren't, it would have asked you, do you want to download this now or download this later, or do you want to update it now or update it later? So you have choices.
So for your very first use of ActiveImage Protector, I did notice on the dashboard it says System Health Status. And it is going to say that your system is not protected because we have not run the solution yet. Hence
the yellow exclamation, the triangular, yellow danger, Will Robinson. Yes, your system is not protected. In that sense, we're talking about ActiveImage Protector. It's not protected because you haven't run a backup yet.
Right. So tell me about all of the other menus that are right here on this page.
Okay, these some of these components that we've installed. Let's start at the bottom and work our way up. How's that?
Okay. All right.
We're going to go to utilities, and essentially the first one is it's the backup. It's basically the boot edition, Windows boot edition, Builder boot edition.
Okay.
MPE. Okay. What this does is it allows you to create a bootable media. And when I mean bootable media, it takes the operating system and makes it so that if you have a USB drive or a CD-ROM drive, you can create bootable media that essentially gets you into this without having to start up your operating system.
Okay.
And there's a number of reasons that we won't go into right now why that's a good thing. The only thing that comes to mind is that if your hard drive crashes and you have to replace the hard drive, you'd use this to boot the system up, recognize there's a hard drive, you connect your backup image through a USB drive, I suppose, and this would allow you to do the recovery onto your hard drive. All right? Go ahead.
I notice on here that there is a BE builder for vStandby. And I remember you mentioning virtualization last time.
Virtualization, again, probably something the end user isn't going to have unless you've got some kind of a server farm you're running out of your home. I don't know many people doing that. But if you're running a business that has, say, a virtual server, you can create a standby virtual machine from your backup.
Okay.
Your backup image file and place it on that virtual server. and it just kind of sits there dormant until needed. It's kind of like having a backup. It is a backup, but it isn't, because it's a full-on machine ready to get started.
So let's click on virtualization then.
Oh,
and
okay,
I noticed there that there are ways to convert.
You can convert from an image, a backup image, turn it into a virtual machine and place it into your virtual environment. You can convert it from an actual disk, a real physical disk. And then there's a P2V adapter. If you have created backups and you already have a virtual machine, as we looked at before on the utilities, what this does is that every time you run a backup, it's going to update the virtual machine from a real machine. Okay, so you're running backups off of another machine and you're doing incremental files. Every time that happens, this adapter allows you to update the virtual machine that's not running. So it's always going to be in the state, almost like a mirror, but not really.
Okay, and that seems to tie in with vStandby. I'm going to skip a couple spots for a second.
Yes, vStandby, virtual standby. It's a virtual standby replica or a virtual standby machine that you've created based on either a backup image file or based on a physical machine that you are doing regular backups on. So with vStandby, what you're doing in a sense is creating, again, in a virtual environment, a virtual machine that's not active. It's there. And every time you run a backup or an incremental backup to get the latest data backed up, it automatically updates that virtual machine. So it's essentially, it's a little lagging, but it's essentially the same thing that you're running there.
So in the first webcast, we did talk about backing up or storing information in the cloud. These are just using the utilities, including the vStandby. These are more tangible ways for those of us that may be a little leery about sending stuff offsite.
Well, not necessarily. I've got nothing bad to say about clouds unless you lose internet access. And then you can't access your clouds. But if you're running virtual environments out of not necessarily convenience, because it's efficient and it's less hardware to deal with, and it still, you're individualizing whatever the purpose of each virtual machine has. And when I say virtual machine, for those unfamiliar with it, they're essentially more servers that are on a single unit. And that's what this does. It lets you fall back onto or switch over into a virtual machine that's an exact replica of the one that you're running in production, should that fail.
And I'm sure that an enterprise level business is going to really embrace having redundancies like this in place.
They can't afford to be down.
Exactly. So let's click on Image Manager now, and I notice a couple of items there.
Image Manager, you can select a profile or a folder. You can review information. It has utilities so you can verify the backup if you haven't put it into your post-backup routine. You can verify that the backup's integrity is still intact. Consolidate backup images with incremental backup images that are part of the same whole backup plan. And you can archive all these images as well, too. Mounting an image for granular recovery. And what that means, because you mentioned, is it an all or nothing recovery? And I said, no. If you said, oh man, I seem to have lost 2 or 3 documents, I don't know where I put them. Wait, we had a backup done this morning. Let me go and mount the image. You view it in your file manager like another drive, and you make your way down to that subfolder where those documents are, and you literally drag them off and copy them and put them back into your system so that you're free to edit them at that point. So yes, files and folders.
Great. You said granular recovery. Let's click on the recovery tab. And I notice volume recovery and file recovery. You touched on this a little bit during the first webcast.
Right.
Run over that again.
Okay, the volume recovery, it's an entire disk or a specific volume. You can have multiple volumes on a single disk because the disk is the physical part. All right. And you can recover or restore the entire volume. Again, like we were talking about, putting in a new hard drive and then recovering or restoring the entire system. All right. That's volumes. That's the entire disk that you're bringing back, because you can't use a computer till you can boot it up. Right. Or again, as I touched on a second ago, file recover. You can recover individual files and folders from the backup because, my whole disk didn't go down. I just lost a couple of folders and I need those back now. So you have the flexibility of doing one or the other.
All right. Which brings us to the reason that we're here. Let's back that baby up.
Let's back it up. Okay. So, we're specific in the title of this because this is scheduling a backup. We can click backup now and get it started and configure, and the only thing we're not doing is scheduling it. But anybody can back up now and tick a few boxes and we're going. But with a backup schedule, you get so much more into it. Now we're back and we're looking at the disk layout. That's what we saw on the dashboard to begin with, the disk information. Mm-hmm. All right, we're creating a backup schedule. Here is all your disk information, and you'll see that disk 1 is my boot drive. All right, there's a Windows recovery in there, and there's the local drive and the system files. And what I want to do is back that up because I want to be able to restore my system as it was before it went south. Mm-hmm. So what we're going to do is check disk 1 right here, and it's going to back up everything in disk 1.
Okay.
The whole thing. We're doing a complete system backup and not individuals. And now we click next. And from next, go ahead.
Real quick before you go on. So for some of our maybe beginner novice users like I am, another name for these sections or pieces on that drive would also be partitions.
Partitions on the physical level, yes.
Okay.
Or you can call them volume. Like it says, the volume size for this whole thing it's stated it was about 930.9 gigabytes, which is most of the drive.
And so I could choose if I only wanted, let's say, just the applications from the C drive, if that's the only thing I wanted to back up.
Yes, you could.
Okay.
Okay, because maybe it still boots up, you just can't get into it. More often than not, if everything's located on the same drive, if it's generally the system files, the boot up files that could get corrupted, and you can always, depending on how much corruption or level of damage that has been incurred on the hard drive, it could wipe out pretty much everything. Okay. But a lot of times I've encountered where the boot drive stops working, it's just the system files. Mm-hmm. And but everything else remains intact. Not to say it's not a good idea to back it up. It is a good idea to back it up, but that might be the case sometimes. So
let's go ahead
for today. We're just going to we're going to come on back over here. Now we're on number 2, destination. First, you got to give a task name. There's going to be a default name. It's called backup, and it's going to be attached with a date and a number. 10:18. Oh, that's the time. Wow.
Yeah, I noticed. Yeah, it's date stamped. Right.
So what I'm going to do is just modify it slightly. System backup. Okay. And this is when it occurred at 10:18 a.m. Pacific time on June 23rd. Yes. And so, if it was 10 o'clock at night, it would be, it's too early for me to do math, so I'm not going to get there.
22:18.
I appreciate that. Okay. And we're going to select a folder right here. I've got a network drive that's been mapped out. However, I can't just jump into it without entering my credentials. So I'm going to enter my credentials here and type out all these little bullet points. Let's see. I can't remember. Let's see.
It's your password is password, isn't it?
It's ABC 123. That's what it is.
That's not hard to figure out.
Anyway, and hopefully without your distraction, I typed in the proper password. No thanks to you. Anyhow,
yeah.
Here we are. I assigned a drive letter Z because I like movies about zombies. Anyhow, we're going back. I've got a backup folder here that is specifically made for backup image files.
Great.
So I'm going to select the folder, and these credentials are going to stay in place for if you should need to create another schedule that's specific to the other drive or another volume and such. And those credentials for that particular folder will be there. So this is the only time I've got to type it in. It'll remember it again. All right. Down here, there's a file name. Now, there's a difference between the task name and the file name. The file name is going to end in a .aiv because we're going to be running initially a full backup to begin with. Full baseline backup of the entire system. But I'm going to, again, and it starts with img for image. I'm going to put, system _ image. And again, there's the timestamp and the date stamp along with d01.aiv. Now, that's going to change the D01 to his D02 for the next baseline backup associated with this when it runs it. So,
if I'm going to look for an image later on, is AIV the only extension I'm going to see?
No, you're going to see. That's a good question. You're going to see AIV, which represents a full baseline backup. That's going to be the largest backup image file you're going to see in terms of size.
Right.
You will see AII images, which stand for incremental backups. And that's what we're going to schedule heading forward. We're going to talk about that, creating a base image backup and then subsequent incremental backups that only take care of backing up the changes that have occurred since the initial backup.
One of the things you mentioned during the first webcast was isolation, and I see that word right down here.
When we were talking
isolation options.
When we were talking about ransomware, we mentioned that this is a good utility that's included in this solution, is to unassign the drive letter from the local hard disk after the backup completes. What we're talking about is if you are infected with malware of some kind, it's going to try to infect the entire network. But if you cut off access to the backup files, then your backup files are safe. And again, if we are taking those backup files and replicating them to A, the cloud, or B, another server in a separate network, and putting them there, then that's just an extra layer of security which keeps the malware from, integrating or permeating into and infecting your backup files, because that's one of the best safeguards against malware is to have a good solid backup plan. And this is how we're contributing to the cause.
Excellent.
To combat that. So,
all right.
And I'm again, the options and such, and why we would check certain options is something that I'd like to save for later, because we're limited on time, and I don't want to keep anyone here for 5.5 hours. So
all right. Let's go ahead and click next.
And here we are at the schedule. Again, you have options: weekly backup of a full baseline backup, monthly. You can set it for specific date or designate specific days that you want a full backup to be taken of this particular, in this case, the system drive. So what I want done is at the first of the month, I want a full backup done and performed at that time. You could conceivably go 2 full backups in the same month, 1-2 weeks later, if you're really concerned about how many changes are going on throughout the course of the week. And again, this comes down to how busy is your server? How many employees do you have doing data entry, closing sales, documentation, updating a database? So these are all a number of things that your server may be trying to handle. Hey, something as simple as an email server. There's always changes going on because there's always email coming and going. So as a server is updated and how busy it is going to be, these are considerations you have in terms of setting the frequency of a full baseline backup. So for simplicity, we're just going to just say we're going to do a monthly backup on the first day of the month, because there's always a first day of the month. So now we come over to incremental backups. And again, if you missed the first webinar we did, you can always go back to the website and replay it. Just look under tutorials. It's there. Incremental backup is only backing up the changes that have occurred since the baseline backup. And if it's already run one incremental backup, those changes are taken into account as well. So they're always being tracked, any changes that have occurred since the last backup and the last incremental backup. And that's what's important here. We got to catch those and record those changes that have occurred. So in an incremental week, again, you have a choice to make weekly incrementals, monthly, or you can designate specific days. And in this particular case, again, how busy is your server? How much transactional data is happening on that server? So you may want to increase the frequency of incremental. I've had customers who say, I do 5 incrementals an hour. Well, it's a busy place. Other customers, we run an incremental every hour. So again, simplicity. How many days a week? Well, Friday's our busiest day. I don't mind Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Tuesday and Thursday, we're doing a lot of phone calls. So we're not really entering data, but we are catching up from the weekend, and then we're getting ready for the weekend, and then we're going to update stuff during the week.
What if I need to monitor something daily?
Well, then check Tuesday and Thursday. Okay. If you need to take incrementals every day of the week, then you can do that. Again, start times. People come into the office as early as 7 a.m. to get started. Make those East Coast calls. End time, typically, let's see, 18, 19, 20. Let's just say till 7 o'clock at night, which is 1900 hours.
Right.
The intervals in which the incremental backups are taken is set right here. You can set it for 60 minutes. You could set it for 1 hour, which is the same thing. However,
60 minutes.
But if you feel you need to, maybe it's every 2 hours you take incrementals. Maybe it's every 3 hours. Or again, if it's a busy place and there's always information getting updated, maybe you run them every 30 minutes.
Okay.
Now, granted, they're small files.
Right.
But it's valuable data nonetheless.
And so, that answers my question. It's going to run it every 30 minutes, 7, 7:30, 8, 8:30, etc.
It's set her up until 1900 hours.
Okay.
All right. And that's how you set it. And once you've set up your schedule, you click OK. And we're back to a slightly different screen. And you realize that maybe every 30 minutes is maybe too often.
Right.
You can always come back to editing the schedule and then changing that to, change it to an hour. Every hour running incremental backups for the servers and recording and backing up all the changes that have been made. Now we're back here again. The Bootcheck is unconfigured because, again, that's a virtual involving a virtual machine, and we'll cover that later when we cover all the options and such. But that's about it. The only other thing I want to touch on is execution priority. What that means is how busy is the backup going to make the server, and is it going to impact performance for everyone who's logged on? So if we're running a full baseline backup, we may want to set that to run at a certain time of day when it's not so busy, maybe the middle of the night. Right. And that way we can set it to medium or high and let the backup get done. But incrementals, that's another story. A, they're smaller files. B, how busy are we? C, is taking incremental backup going to impact the server that much? Depending on how many transactions are being made on that server at the time. So this is during business, so you may want to just make it on a low or a medium, so it doesn't impact.
Okay.
And here, let me touch on this retention policy. You're going to be accumulating backup images into that storage area that you're sending it to. So you can set up the number of backup image sets. And when I say sets, that's the baseline and all the incrementals associated with it.
Right.
So at the end of the month, you got a big baseline file, and then you got, how many hours of incremental images 5 days a week up to that point. And you can let it go when you enable this. Delete only the incremental files, or delete both the full and the incremental files after every 3. And what this does is creates a moving window of every 3 backups. And we're talking monthly because, again, we're at the baseline and then we're at the incrementals. Then you run another baseline, that whole counter starts over. Right. So if you do it every 3 months or every 2, so January, February, we're doing a backup, bunch of incrementals. February, backup, bunch of incrementals. We hit March, January's gone, because now we're recreating and we're staying as current. And you're comfortable with, I need 6 months worth, I need 2 months worth, based on this particular example of scheduling.
Right. So, and I see that this is optional, so any customer can set this up based on their own retention policies in place.
Right, depending on, again, how much space do I have to hold all these backup images?
Right.
Yeah, I can always replicate, then delete also. So I can move them elsewhere where I have more storage, maybe the cloud. Maybe I want to keep everything back for a year in case I got to go back that far. So,
all right.
We get next. And this is the summary of all the options we have picked in order to schedule a backup.
Okay.
And that's where we're at.
Now, once we've scheduled it, we're set in place. Is everything locked in stone, or if I need to make changes to that schedule, can I do that?
That's a good question. Let me hit done. And the first thing you're asked is whether you want to run the full backup now, because you're setting it to run a full backup on the first day of the month. And like today's the 23rd.
Right.
We got to wait. We got to wait till the end of the month before that full backup is run. I don't think so. We can click yes and run the full backup now.
Right.
And then the incrementals will begin. Okay. I say no, and we're done. Now, if we come here to this schedule, this is like an accordion interface. Yeah.
Right. And this is on the first page of the dashboard.
This is the dashboard, and you click under schedule. You can click the schedule. There is a summary that has been brought down and contracted, and it's really quick. But over here on the right side, you have a menu, and you can, again, initiate the backup, run an incremental. You can disable the schedule, and that's the task. And right here, there's the magic word you were asking.
Right.
I was second guessing myself a moment ago as to how often I want incrementals run. I went back and changed it before I finished. But you know what? I think I should go back to my first choice. You click at it. You're back in the schedule now and back at setting.
And as you mentioned,
number of incrementals. Yes.
As you mentioned before, the credential screen is already pre-populated. So you're not going back through each and every step a second time.
No, you're not. You don't have to, because you're just going back into it, and you have the ability to go in and change the times and the dates. One thing I forgot, the execution time was 10:33, and that would be in the morning. And I really want that, let's say 2100 hours.
Okay.
All right, because that puts it at the middle of the night. So we went back and changed the execution date of the baseline backup to be in the middle of the night. And that's it. It's next and done. And there we go. It's been changed. It tells you what time the first month, the backup that's going to be done at the first of the month every month. And that is how we set it. Set it and forget it, like your crock pot. You put everything in, turn it on, walk away, come back in about 4 to 6 hours and see if whatever you threw in there is going to work.
So you're giving away your age. It's time for you to get an Instapot.
I have it. It's too big. It's too big, the Instapot.
All right, well, that wraps up this month's edition of Meet and Geek. You're going to come back next month and show us some more features on ActiveImage Protector?
Just keep looking at the website. Visit our Facebook page. It's Actiphy US, Actiphy USA. We also have a Twitter account. That's what we're limited to right now. The website, just look under the on the first screen. You can see announcements and press releases. You'll see it in the announcements. And there'll be links there in order to register and click and show up. We're keeping it the fourth Wednesday of every month at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And that's when we'll be here. Great. And again, we're going to try, again, it's very easy to just show screens. And I just want people out there to know and understand that hey, we're doing this to keep it interesting. I want you entertained, but I want you learning it as well. And we're not going to make it long and drawn out. That's about it.
Yeah, that is the goal. So
yes, exactly.
All right, so that wraps things up for this month. My name is Matt. Thanks for tuning in. Robert, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me again, and we'll see you next month, Matt. You take care.
Bye-bye.